There is a very real, sometimes requirement that the Lord makes of us to relinquish having to know. Relinquish having to know what's going down. What's going down now, Lord? He says this is on a need to know basis, and you don't need to know. Because it works something in us. It really does. It works something very good in us. It works in us a recognition of His sovereignty and His good care. And it weans us from our need to have to be in control or be in charge or have all the file cabinets tidied up, And, there's a certain level that, I've got to know, I got to pay some bills so I can still drive my car tomorrow, something like that. But on many issues of life, it's just it's a big deal for God that we have to depend on Him. He says, "No, I'm just going to kind of cut your water off." Now, that sounds kind of mean, but that's not what He's doing it for. So I'm just turning your water off so that you don't lean to the arm of flesh or to the natural mind. And, oh boy, that's touching me. Because every one of us have walked through those very, very heart-wrenching, soul-searching time periods that in the end become very precious to us. They become those momentous occasions where we got pressed into God. We got pressed into His wonderful care and His trusting His sovereignty when we didn't have a clue. And even though they hurt like a mother bear in the middle of it, in the end it yields gold. And I think that's what makes our heart tender about it later on when we call it up to remember it. And we call it to memory, and it's, the dealings of God are so precious. They yield gold. They establish and make us real, true men and women of God. See, up to that point, we're wannabes and trying to be's. But when that gets worked in us, and I don't know if it'll ever be done, it'll probably keep going on into eternity, but the dealings of God are so precious. So, yes, here's a story, and you've kind of heard it before, but it sure makes the point. And so, being a believer essentially all my life, being in ministry most of my life, and then I moved to Wisconsin in 1989. Everything was hunky-dory for about the first 8 months. And then all hell broke loose, and the bottom fell out, and the rug got pulled out from under me, and here I was hanging high and dry in no man's land. In a howling wasteland, I would say sometimes. I would tell people, and they'd say, "Oh, don't say that, don't say that." Well, that's what it felt like to me. And I was not in sin. I guarantee you I was not in sin. I was not violating some kind of spiritual rules and principles and practices and behaviors. It just happened. And boy, I did not understand that. I did not know why. In fact, God did not console me. Honestly, God didn't console me in my dangling. I did not feel like I heard from God. I did not feel like I had a rhema. The stuff that we all appreciate, the stuff we live for, I didn't feel like I had a rhema for 2 years. I read my Bible and it was just as dry as a bone. And it was tough. And I told people, I think I'm saved, but I sure don't have any feelings to confirm it. There was nothing. None of my goosebumps, none of my tears, none of that tender stuff that helps to confirm your way with God and your position. And doggone it, that went on for nearly 4 years. It was over 3 years before there was a breakthrough. Now, I didn't know how to make a breakthrough. I also knew that I couldn't run from it. It would not be okay to go run from it, to go get some kind of diversion or distraction or some new scenery. It was not going to be okay to go just bolt out of there. I said this a few times. If I had a licking coming, which I don't know why, I guess I just need to take my licking. Now, in retrospect, I don't think I did anything wrong. Now, I'm confident I didn't do anything wrong in the natural, and I don't know that I did anything wrong in the spiritual realm. But here's the part that God wanted. I think he knew that I was too doggone self-sufficient, and my brain was too capable. And he just said, you know what? We kind of have to go through a weaning process. We have to wean you from your brain. And that's not going to be fun. Any of you who've been around dairy cattle, you know, when dairy farmers will separate the calves from the cows right after they're born, shortly after, in order so that the farmer can have the milk, and then they raise the calf on the bottle until they can sell it. Well, that weaning process is one wild ride. You hear the calf just bellowing, and you hear the mom bawling, and they'll just pine away for each other. It's a terrible mess. I mean, you listen to that cattle yard out there in the pasture, and you just think somebody is torturing somebody, you know? And it is not fun. When our soul man has to go through the weaning process, you know, if we're just going to call it what it is in Hebrews 12, it's the pruning or disciplinings of the Lord. And all discipline isn't necessarily because it's correction because we did something wrong. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It's just God says, I've got to take you to the next level. And it's going to be a little bit of a strenuous time here to go from grade A to grade B, or grade 2 to grade 3. And that's not a fun experience. But I'm here to say that at that time, and for that particular grade, it yielded gold. And so when I call it up to look at that gold, oh boy, does it call up a lot of different emotions. And in the end, they're all good. They all yielded good. In the middle, oh, they were horrible. They were torturous. They were without meaning. They had no definition. I felt like Paul Kane said in 1989 before we moved to Wisconsin, he says, some of you, the Lord's going to dangle. And he said, most of us don't dangle very gracefully. You know, when you're dangling out in the middle of no man's land, and think of a leaf hanging out there, you're the last leaf at the end of fall. You know, it just kind of dangles there, and that wind's blowing you around. But the Lord, I'm here to say, and we all know we've got wonderful stories that we could tell about our gold, but the Lord, when the gold is produced, oh boy, it's the best ever. You know, Job said, when I'm tried as though by fire, I will come forth as pure gold. That gold is worth everything, even the pain, the process to get there. Again, Hebrews 12 says, those who are trained by this process learn the peaceable fruit of righteousness. Oh boy, that just sets so well in my soul today. It's so comforting to know that, you know, all of us have some miles behind us that were pretty hard, pretty torturous even. But we've all got some gold to show for it. We've produced, God and us together have danced a dance, and there's been some gold produced that when we call it up and look at it, we could say with all confidence, the gold that God produced through the dealings of God are beautiful. They're wonderful. They do produce good things. Just one other little piece of definition or understanding in the middle of it. In the middle of it, you can't help yourself. It's not possible, because that's part of the process. If you could help yourself, that would be antithetical to what God's doing, because he's wanting to wean us from ourselves. And so in the midst of it, you're like, well, I could do something. Let me do something. What is it you're doing? I'll be about your business. I'll be busy for you today, God, and I'll do something. And it just doesn't come like that. It's not an easy thing to just reach up and pick a fruit and say, well, this is what I'll do today. It's part and parcel of the project is that you can't even help yourself. And so we have to learn to relinquish at that time our capacity to change the order of the day. It's like, okay, God, okay, I say uncle. I got my hand up, like Paul says, little Johnny's got his hand up. Here, teacher, over here. Teacher says, I ain't picking you today. I see your hand, little Johnny, but today isn't your day to shine. Right? Today we got to do this weaning process or this dangling process. And it's a good thing that's happening. It's a good thing when that happens, because boy, I'm here to tell you, gold comes out of it. At the end of that 3 or 4 year period in Wisconsin, came forth a little, some of you know, Paul knows and Sherry knows, and a few others visited there, Chuck did, a little revival center. As Mike Bickle says, little rough and ugly, but oh, it had some of the best stuff there. The juice was thick. And many people there, especially theirs, measure their life today from the juice, from the presence of the Lord that they experienced then. Now, fortunately for us, we're moving on and there's better juice to be had. But at that time, that was some of the best juice any of us could find. Anyway, there's a little story, and I'm sticking to my story.